from the time we left Olympia last year to now, our budget shortfall became $5 billion greater than it was. Now that was totally unforeseen, just as the stock market drop was, or hopefully it was unforeseen, otherwise I have some things to talk to my investment advisor about. So we did take some actions to address the supplemental budget, the 07-09 budget. As you know, there's still, the present budget runs through the month, through June 30th. We did a number of things, and I won't go through this, we've already passed bills, but in doing so, we basically went through agency by agency and cut deeply into programs already. These are programs you may not be aware of, but many of you around the room are, because you were affected by that. We froze new hires in state government. We know there was no equipment that hadn't been purchased by that point that was authorized over $1,000. We froze salaries for all state management employees, and we cut spending in a number of areas, and immediately terminated discussion about contracts that had not already been signed. The net effect is there were about $730 million in avoided costs that we did there. So we got on board with that. But more importantly, we also began very early looking at what our options are coming into this next budget. So want to go to the next slide? Here's what's very important to know. And this really frames why we have a problem in the state. Heavily sales tax dependent in the state of Washington, as you know. No income tax, and I might point out, not likely to see one anytime many of us are alive. But 52% of our local, of our state revenues are driven by sales taxes, some business and occupations taxes. Very little property tax. I know some of you were concerned about property taxes. That's primarily a local issue, but it is a part of state government. So next slide. And obviously this reinforces why you have this situation, because in almost every sector which provides significant revenues, not only to state but local government, sales have plummeted. And I can tell you, just talking to friends in the car business, there's one area right along I-5 by 5 that used to sell 500 cars a month. I believe someone said in November they sold 73. It's a lot of sales tax that we're not getting a slice of. Go ahead, next slide. Okay, so here's the situation. When we left, based on the March forecast, we put our budget together there, and that's what we left Olympia with last year. Since then, if you look at the effect on the current budget we have, the current law, or 0709, and then how it affects projections for the next budget, 0911, that's the one we're going to be talking about, we lost $5 billion. Okay, so that's, needless to say, that's a lot of money. So that's how things got that bad that quick. Next slide. So what impact does it have? Well, these are where assumptions have changed. In other words, you saw the other slide where we showed how much sales tax. Well, that much sales tax has now gone away. Okay, this much of the B&O tax has gone away, but that may get bigger as more businesses close down or cut back or what have you. And a little bit on the property tax side, but the big chunk in sales tax primarily because of lack of retail activity. Go ahead, next slide. Okay, and obviously, this is also driven by the fact that we have significant increases. We're doing more with less. We have significant increases in terms of children on state health care. We can talk about that. That was a decision we made as a state, that we wanted to make sure kids were healthy to avoid long-term costs. But those numbers have gone up significantly. People on general assistance and also kids in the education system. Next slide. Okay, so here's where we are today. We face a budget shortfall of about $8.5 billion. So even if we were to freeze all, maintain all existing services at a level we saw 2 years ago, and did nothing else, we would still be $3 billion short. So we have a problem going in. I'll talk briefly about the transportation and construction budgets. Those aren't as bad as the operating budget. But you all know we can take great pride in the fact that we've been very successful in terms of funding projects like the restoration of the Fox Theater, the MAC over the years, our community centers, and so on. Also the buildings we see on the River Point campus and what you've seen throughout the community college system. Those things are important, first of all, because they provide infrastructure to the community. Secondly, because they create good living wage jobs. There will be some projects that move ahead in this budget. I'm pleased to say, primarily on the education side, including community colleges, because we have some real needs here. But we have roughly about $600 million less in bonding capacity than we had last biennium. So less money there too. On the transportation side, between 600 and 800 million less than we had before. Transportation gas tax revenues dropping fairly significantly, and some cost increases, not necessarily a whole lot. We can talk about projects specifically. I will be part of writing the transportation budget. Probably be some questions about some specific projects. But I'll answer one up front right now. Yes, I believe I can deliver money for the North-South corridor, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So next slide. This is the, back up just for a second. I just want to point something out. What we have to remember when we look at the budget is about 58% of that is off limits. So go ahead, Andrew. And this is where the money goes right now, by the way. About 41% of the tax dollars go to schools, and then social services, medical assistance, and you see colleges and university. And so that's basically how the budget breaks down. Go ahead and go to the next one. So this slide's a little misleading. It just should really say legally off limits, but more than half the budget really are areas where that we really can't cut. In the Constitution, K-12 is protected, basic education, as the primary duty of the state, and we're prevented. Now, there are some areas of K-12 spending that in fact are discretionary, and I believe you'll see those, see some significant cuts this year. But education, debt service, and certain areas of health care are protected. So that means basically this area out here, 42, let's just say half of it, are areas that represent some opportunities to cut. But keep in mind there are two things. Some areas that we cut in, we lose federal funding on the other side, so it's not a particularly good investment. In other cases, when you cut, you buy costs on the other side. What does that mean? Someone doesn't have health care, they get sick, they go to the hospital, they can't pay, you and I as private payers end up paying, and that's part of the problem. Also, people don't have, let's see, the mentally ill don't have medications. They end up causing some other problems, some societal issues, and there are costs there. But can we make those decisions? Yes. Can we cut prisons and law enforcement? Obviously. Does the public want to cut them? My sense is they don't. But these are obviously all the areas that can be cut. So I just want to point out that we're talking about an $8.5 billion shortfall, not applied to a $33 or $37 billion budget, but half of that. So think about that. That is deep and that is painful, but it is the situation. So go ahead to the next slide. Okay, so the question at this point is what does the budget look like? We can make drastic cuts. You could raise taxes and fees, but let me point this out. Under the provisions of 960, it takes a 2/3 vote in the legislature to pass tax increases. No thinking person I know of thinks that there is 2/3 vote under any circumstances to pass those. So we will be leaving Olympia with a balanced budget built primarily on cuts, built on painful cuts. That's the fact of the matter. So you ask, what will those cuts look like? Well, the governor's budget, as you remember when it came out, raised a lot of concerns, okay? Anticipate that our cuts will be the governor's cuts plus another 50% on top of that, because things have gotten so bad since November. Think about that. That is significant. It's not trying to scare you, it's just what it is, and we all have to deal with it. So people say, what would it look like? Well, very possibly the budget, which is being written as we speak, probably see a budget come out on March 23rd. We'll include things like reducing the basic health plan. So about healthcare coverage for about 40,000 low-income people. Eliminating housing, medical care, drug and alcohol treatment for about 28,000 low-income individuals with physical and mental disabilities. Eliminating adult day health care for about 1,900 disabled and elderly people. Eliminating the universal vaccine program that provides vaccines to immunize kids and others. Cutting community mental health treatments, very important area in our community. Other ideas that may or may not make in the budget are eliminating I-732 teacher pay salary increases. In fact, eliminating across the board cost of living allowances and health benefits for both represented and non-represented employees in this state. Also, I would say the reality of layoffs in state government, and people are talking about, at some point, furloughs of state employees. Please, I'm not trying to scare you, I'm just saying, I just want you to know these things are things, honestly, that we have to be looking at.